Hello, hello, hello. Aurelia Davis here, the educator's educator, coming to you on Good Friday. This is Good Friday in so many ways. It's Good Friday because it's the Friday before Easter, and I'm sure a lot of teachers are still out. This is usually spring break for Chicago Public Schools, and I'll tell you how that came about a long time ago. But anyway, today just basically celebrating teachers and coming to you with a subject that's sort of dear to me now, even though it was not a part of the curriculum while I was teaching, but it is a part of a very serious part of curriculum that's going on now, and that's social emotional learning. Social emotional learning. Basically, what's been happening is that educators and the whole state of schools have been looking forward to seeing exactly what is needed for children to learn how, in other words, the emotional attachment to children learning. I'll say that again, the emotional attachment to children learning. And in the past couple of years, they have found it has been founded that if a child is not in the right emotional time set, the right emotional timeline or time set, or the mindset, that's what I meant to say. If a child is not in the right emotional mindset for learning, then learning basically is not going to take place. I'll say that again. If a child is not in a good emotional mindset, then most likely that child is not going to be able to grasp what is being taught to them in school. For the last, I would say, last couple of months, I have had the privilege of taking a certificate program through Mindful Practices, which is located in Oak Park. And what I did is I participated in a 10-week, hour and a half session of learning how to conduct SEL in the classroom. And I would say that the individuals that participated in this was basically SEL coaches that worked with schools, and were individuals that would go into a particular building and teach teachers on how to do the social emotional curriculum within their buildings. Those coaches were able to go in and work with classrooms, and teaching them the different techniques and the different prompts on doing social emotional learning within the classroom, from kindergarten or preschool all the way up to 12th grade. Because at this particular time within the state of Illinois, that is a part of a curriculum. There is a curriculum for social emotional learning within the state of Illinois. And just evaluating some educators, some of them have been able to do it successfully, and then some have been having difficulties with it. But what they're finding out also is that if they have a commitment to this within the building itself, there has to be a commitment within the building. That means the top down effect. That means the administrators are practicing social emotional learning, and from the administrators it filters down to the teachers, and from the teachers it filters down to the classrooms, and then from kindergarten all the way up to 8th grade. So all teachers and all educators, and even extra staff, would have to buy into the curriculum of social emotional learning in order for that building to be on target, as that being something that's very important to that particular building, in order for children to be able to succeed, and success. So some schools have had success with it, and some schools have not. From what I'm also understanding is that it's not a mandatory something that you can put into your building. But what they're finding out also is that when they're working with children that have been through traumatic situations and what so forth, that it needs to be, it's something that they have had to eventually grasp, for the simple reason that what it does is it helps to calm the building. It helps to put the building in a particular calming area, or calm, that so that children can learn, my own particular take on the social emotional learning is that It's a good thing to have. It's good to have in the building. But what my question is still, whatever is happening in the classroom, does it filter over back into the house? In other words, whatever is happening during the day in the classroom, does it have a tendency of going back into the home? Because teachers are not with these students on a daily basis. We're not with, I mean, they're not with them 24 hours. So as you look at a child and the type of living environment a child is coming from, that basically goes into the classroom on the next day. Whatever trauma that child may have had during the night, hopefully nothing, but whatever trauma that child may have had at home goes into the classroom on the next day. And unfortunately, if the trauma is not being dealt with at home, then you're going to see the same issues over and over and over and over again. So that's my one question about social emotional learning. What takes place? How can we, are we filtering the skills that you're learning in the classroom? Are you filtering it back into the household? In other words, are you teaching the parents about social emotional learning? They have social issues, emotional issues also. So there should be a rounded effect, as to how this works and how it is going to be successful. But today, we're talking about how literacy or literature, books, how books can basically go into uh, making social emotional learning successful, how books can be brought into the curriculum of social emotional learning. And I did some research on it. But while doing my research, I also had questions because now throughout the country, books are being banned from schools. So how does an educator know exactly what books they can bring into their classroom and what books they are not that are prohibited from being brought into the classroom to teach social and emotional learning? So before you go and as an educator, before you would go and purchase books, extra books. I'm going to be honest, not in Chicago, but in some other states, you need to check to see if the books that you're selecting to help with social emotional learning is allowed in your classroom. And that's the first and foremost thing that you have to do. Other than that, I'm going to be honest, I probably would make something or create my own books, to help my students, whatever it takes in order for my children to be successful and whatever it takes for my children to thrive. That's what I would do in my particular classroom. But I did see that, I did Google and find that there are some books that are out there. I'm not going to necessarily share those particular books because I'm not sure if you are, but if you just Google developing social emotional learning skills through literature, things will come up. Some things will come up. Some things will come up. But it was actually, it says social emotional based questions at different stages of a reading can help a child emotionally. I'll say it again. Asking social emotional learning based questions during a reading passage or while reading a basal reader or while reading a particular story or while reading a novel can basically help children with social emotional learning. And when I think back about when I was teaching, we would not only have stories from our basal reader, but we will also do novel studies. We will also do novel studies. It was one that I just can't think of, but I know that my girlfriend and I would also do the boxcar children. We would do the boxcar children, and what we would do is our children would read that. And this particular book about the boxcar children, these particular children were orphans, and they basically lived in a boxcar because they did not have parents. They did not have parents. Um, there was another series that I would read aloud to my children, but when you find out that you're reading stories about children that are going through having emotional issues, you find that your students have a tendency of jumping into that particular character. and they may have expressed, they may express, I say, I feel that way too sometimes. Now, during the time when I was teaching or reading these novels, I did not necessarily engage my children as to how they were feeling, What I would do is I would ask about the particular character and what the character felt. And I guess at the time, if I had enough information to know that this was going to be going into social and emotional learning, and that some of the novels I was reading to the children would eventually help my students, then I probably would have asked more detailed questions. So reading a story or having a story, first of all, you would tap into, let me go through my notes, before reading the story, the questions you would ask, based on the cover, what emotions do you see, especially if there was a character on the front of the cover? And even with the little children, are they sad? Are they angry? Are they happy? Do they have fear? Do you see hurt on their faces? So on and so forth. And even with the smaller children, what you can do is go into the faces, the happy faces and the emojis. I'll call them the emojis. And you would be surprised that as one child looks at a character's facial features, they may not see the same thing that another child or another student sees. So you need to, as an educator, you need to be able to distinguish what the children are feeling or what your students are feeling when they look at a particular character that has facial features that may show sadness, that may show fear, that might show hurt, or that type of, or show happiness. It doesn't have to always be sad or hurt. There may be happiness, and usually with happiness, somebody is smiling or their eyes are lighting up and so forth. So that's before the reading that you would tap into. And then during the reading, can you identify the emotions that the main character is feeling? What event or events led him or her to feel this way? How is the emotion similar to or different from what the character was feeling earlier in the story? So in the meantime, did that character in the beginning, the character was feeling one way? With certain events that have happened in the story thus far, is the character feeling differently now? What is the character feeling at this particular time? And then more than anything else, what made the character change? What made the character change as far as his emotions is concerned? What made the character change? You definitely want to get in those type of I'm trying to find the word, questions that basically, like we were talking about here before, think out of the box. What made them feel that way? What made them feel that way? And sometimes you have to let the children know, um, if somebody is running down the street running, and they fall and scrape their knee, how are they going to feel? And so most times the children would say they may get up crying, especially if they see that their knee is scraped and there's blood or something. They'll get up crying because there's pain. There's pain. But you have to also let the children know that pain does not always come when you fall. Sometimes pain is a feeling that you get in your head. If somebody has hurt your feelings, and somebody has maybe called you a name, or somebody has made you upset, or made you angry, that can cause pain also. So pain is not always a physical. Pain is not always physical. It can be feeling, it can be an emotional. There can be emotional pain as far as, and then also physical pain. So that's what you're tapping into during the reading. During the reading, after the reading, then you want to see, how did the main character's emotion change throughout the story? Cite evidence to track the development. In other words, that, did the character change 2 or 3, 4 times, or were they the same throughout the whole story? And if they were the same throughout the whole story, what made them feel that way? More than anything else, you want the children to start expressing how they feel. You want them to take the character's emotions and put it into themselves. Put it into themselves as to what may make them feel the same way. You want them to start to express their emotions. Do you think other readers feel this different emotions about the conclusion of the story? In other words, how did the story end? How did the story end? How did the characters, did they start off as enemies? Did they end up being friends? Were they hurt? Were they sad? Were they happy? All of those are emotions. And those emotions you can feel as a child. And we all have emotions. We all have emotions. And because I work with younger children, I most likely would probably do like a journal entry. Write down a time when you felt very, very happy. And what was it about? What made you feel happy? What made you smile? What made you grin? What made you laugh? Then another journal entry. Tell me about a time that made you cry, and why did you cry? Why did you cry? What emotions made you cry? Then tell me about another time when you just didn't know what to do. You were just confused. You were just confused, and you really didn't know how to express yourself for the simple reason that it was confusing and whatever. But literature, as an educator, what I would do is I would continue to go through books and books and books and books. I did find a list of books, um, and they basically have like social emotional books that are out there. And if you go tap into a library or tap into a website, you most likely will see them. I've been finding out that more authors are writing social emotional books now than they've ever written before because it is a part of a curriculum. And some of the characteristics that they're tapping into is like statements being overlooked and taken advantage of. That's a book about a social emotional learning, a book about being taken advantage of and being overlooked. Then there's another book. Let me see if I can sort of tap into them. Okay. Another book. I guess somebody gave me about 10. Uh, breathing techniques. Oh, okay. Coping with social emotional learning. And the interesting thing about this particular, some books, is teaching children even how to breathe because there are certain techniques that go along with social emotional learning, breathing and relaxing. And basically, it's almost like practicing yoga, calm periods within the day. Calm periods within the day. And I also talked about in some of my lives how being a teacher, you need to know immediately that from the beginning of your day what kind of social emotional learning is going on in your classroom at that particular time. And you can bet that all of your children are not going to be on the same page. All of your students are not going to be on the same page. And what I found this out before I even knew about social emotional learning, what I did find out is that I would take a poll in the morning and find out exactly how my children were thinking and what they were thinking, and then those particular students. So I have a tendency of dividing my children up into different groups so that I can work with the ones that were ready to learn, and those that were not ready to learn. Then they would have time to just sort of get themselves together, get themselves together. So going all the way back to the literature part, have books in your classroom that have been approved. Have books in your classroom that have been approved. I would have like a library box just based on social emotional learning. And there are so many books out there now that you can easily build a library for that. And as your children are going through particular traumas or feelings and emotions and whatever, give them that particular book or either read certain books to your children at the time, because this will give them the comfort they need sometimes. And then, of course, it's not only about the literature that they're reading, but there's are times when you can sit down with that child and have them write down what they're feeling. In other words, and of course, to always tap into your resources. Always tap into your resources. That's why your counselors are there. That's why your psychologists are there. That's why your social workers are there. They're in that building to help that child with whatever's bothering them or whatever trauma they're going through at that particular time. And so, and a lot of times the resources are not only in the building, but then there are resources on the outside that your school should have a list of, so that that child can basically get, or that family can get the help that they need. So to conclude everything, what I would suggest you do is, first of all, find out through your district what books have been banned. And then, no, first, let's back that up. Go through and find out a list, get a list of at least 15 books. 15 books. And I'm thinking also, they don't necessarily have to be, what would you say, grade appropriate? Grade appropriate. I believe that a fifth or sixth grader can look at a book that's maybe for third grade and still be able to get something out of it as far as social emotional learning is concerned. So they don't have to be grade appropriate, even though there are a lot of novels and journals out there for the older kids that they can use and tap into. But just to have a mixture, and a mixture of a little bit of everything in that social and emotional learning library in your classroom, where your children can just grab a book and tap into something that they're dealing with at that particular time, that would be very helpful to them and be very important to them to meet their needs at that particular time. So the first thing is to find out, get a listing, go online and find out a listing of social emotional books that are out there for grades preschool through 12th grade. And then find out what's happening now, find out through your district what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And then set up a library in your classroom. Set up a library in your classroom. There's always good to have a selection of books that your children can read on their own. And then it's always good to have a selection of books that you can read to your students, because sometimes hearing that voice, your voice expressing, and then you asking the questions, the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, and the ending of the story, what was going on with this particular character? How did they feel? What were they feeling? Were they happy, sad? What made them that way? Those are the books that you can read to your entire class to get on board with social emotional learning. And then at the same time, like I spoke about it in the beginning, I feel that this can only be successful if you take it into the household, if you take it back to the home. And so, as your children are reading, and then you can just let the parents know when you have that conversation with them that you do have a list of books, maybe some of the books that were banned in the school, you can allow that parent to have those particular books at home, and just be, have it in their child's library, so that they can get the support at home and at school. It was interesting talking. I love talking about this. I probably will come to you again talking about this particular subject, social emotional learning, a very, very, very strong component of what's happening with our children in our classrooms today. But if you want more information, just go over to my website, aureliadavis.com, and see some of the products that I have in place. And I just hope that everybody will have a happy holiday, happy Easter holiday, and just take care. And teachers, I know most of you are going to be probably going back on next week, and so just get the rest you need over this weekend, so that you can go back and just do what you need to do in order to be successful, because I've already given you that success. I've already told you that you are successful, you are valued, and I love you because I've been where you are. So I give the teachers support on a regular basis. But this is Aurelia Davis, the educator's educator. Have a great afternoon and a beautiful weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.